All right. Well, welcome to What is DevOps Really? This is intended as a makeup for the the discussion we did on what is DevOps last week that a couple of us found very useful as a discussion, but apparently confused a lot more people. So we wanted to actually do an intro to DevOps. And this is intended as, let me explain what DevOps is. Let me tell you about some of the pieces around it so you know some of the vocabulary and some of the ideas behind it. Not that you can do DevOps by the time you're done here or anything, just kind of have an idea of what it's about. So this is for you guys, so please feel free to interrupt and ask questions if something's not confusing, or if something's confusing, so we can get you guys the understanding, so you know what we're talking about when you hear DevOps and hear us talk about it and talk about some of the ideas behind it. So to start, I just want everyone to take a little bit of time to think about this. And for those of you that aren't doing day-to-day development, feel free to replace software delivery process with any process, right? And you'll get an idea of what we're talking about for DevOps. So first, just think about your day-to-day job and what are your biggest worries about your process. And when someone says there was a problem with what we just did with the release or whatever process you're doing, what's your first guess? Like, oh, I know what that is. It's almost always the same thing. On the other hand, take a look. If you had to push something out immediately, it's an emergency. We have to do this right now. We don't have any time to waste. We can cut whatever corners we need to. What do you think most likely is the piece that's going to suffer, right? What are the pain points in that case, right? We can eliminate our process. We can do whatever it takes. People have given us permission to do whatever we need. What are the things you think are most likely to go wrong, and what corners don't you dare cut, right? Now, when we do a lot of our talks and our workshops and tutorials, a lot of times we'll spend some time and actually do this as an exercise, right? Figure out what are the big problems that you're running into, because those things that you're identifying as having problems, as being worries, those are the things that are lacking in your process. That's what your process needs more of, or it's missing, or it's incomplete, or we're not doing the right types of tests around it. We just don't have any confidence in those pieces. And being successful in DevOps means that those will not be significant concerns, right? And I don't want to make it sound like that's a side effect of DevOps. That's what DevOps is about, is getting to the point where you don't have major problems expected. You don't have things that you know are going to be issues. Everything in the normal case should flow normally. Now, for those of you that don't do software development day to day, if it sounds like that should be a normal case, it should be. But in general, in the places we go to, that is not the normal case. Most places are in a constant state of chaos. They're always in upheaval. There's always some major problem, and even the things that should be normal day-to-day things are always having problems. Now, that's not to say that's the standard throughout the industry, although it's probably closer to that than we like. But remember, as consultants, we get called into places that are having problems. Nobody ever calls up Coveros and says, come in and help us out. Things are going really, really well, and we want your advice on that, right? It's almost always, hey, we think we're doing the right things, and it's not going well. Can you guys show us what we're doing wrong? Or more often, hey, we want to go fast, we want to go better, and by the way, we don't want to make any changes, so can you guys help us out with that? So some vocabulary here. One of the things we talk about a lot when we're talking about DevOps is the delivery pipeline. And a lot of people have different definitions for it, but for me and for most of us, I think, that do this, we talk about delivery pipeline is just the process of taking code from the developers and getting it into the hands of the customers, right? Getting the end users to use it, right? It's probably a mix of automated and manual testing, automated and manual deploys. Some things work really well, some things don't. And it may not even start right at the developers. It may start before that with the requirements. And John Willis has said before, and I like the way he describes it, that this is the aha to the chain, right? The delivery pipeline is taking the idea and making it valuable to you, right? So we have an idea, we want this feature. the process we go through to get that into the hands of our customers and get value out of it, that's the delivery pipeline, the aha to the ka-ching. So one of the things we do to figure out how we get there is something called a value stream map, or value stream mapping exercise. Now, to do a real value stream mapping exercise, it would take several days. We'd have to have a lot of people in the room, people from every part of the company, not just a few people that think they know how the company works, but people from people that are doing, people that are thinking, people that are giving the orders, right? Everybody involved, because everybody has to see what goes into the process, right? And we would list out all those steps from the developer to getting into production, that whole delivery pipeline, right? Whether it's manual, automated, whatever. And we'll start going through what are the times it takes to do things. What are the idle time versus the work time, right? Idle time is, hey, I need to get this signed off on, so it's going to sit on Jeff's desk for 3 days while we're waiting for him to give it approval, right? That's idle time, 3 days idle time. Then there's stuff that's work time, right? It takes 2 hours for these tests to run. That's 2 hours of work time. In the idea of lean manufacturing, which is where value stream really comes from, anything that's work time is value being added, right? It doesn't mean it's the most efficient way of doing the work, but it is, we are adding value at that time. Idle time, any wait time, any time that the process is just held up waiting for something to happen, that's called waste, okay? And no value is being added. And one of the things we're trying to get to in DevOps is to eliminate as much of the waste as possible, right? Now this does not, value stream is not a software development thing in particular. In fact, it comes out of manufacturing. It's from the Toyota production system is where it really became popular. It has to do with the entire pipeline, the entire process. And if we were talking about manufacturing, and traditionally we'll talk about like an auto parts or an auto manufacturing plant, they'll talk about the pipeline or the value stream starting when you do the orders to get the parts in from your suppliers. That's all part of the value stream, right? Because sometimes we have to wait on parts. We have to do the ordering. All of that is time we have to invest. So as we go through this, we do this, like I said, this value stream map, and we do a light version of it where we just list out the processes and identify a work time and a wait time for it. And a lot of times I'll even tell people, don't try to be specific about the times when we're doing this the first round. Break it down into just, does this take minutes? Does this take hours? Does this take days? Does this take weeks? Just those rough buckets, and figure out where the stuff is. And what we're trying to do is identify the impediments in our process, figure out what's really holding this up. And like I said, this does not have to be development. So those of you that aren't doing day-to-day development, you could be looking at this for any process you have to go through, all right? And so value stream is a very important part of DevOps because it's telling us what our process is like so we can start improving it. All right. Any questions so far? All right, I'll take that as a no. All right. So one of the books we talk about a lot when we're introducing DevOps, and something that we recommend everybody actually read, even those of you that aren't doing development, is a book called The Phoenix Project. It's written by Gene Gotimer and several others. And it's a novel, it's fictional, but when you read through it, especially if you've been in the industry for any length of time, a lot of the things are very, very true. It's about a team that the protagonist is thrust into a position. He moves from a team lead to a director of operations in IT, and he just realizes what he's inherited and all the problems that are going on and all the things that are going wrong and how many problems he has to fight. And the whole book is really just about his journey to get his team and his organization to do better. Just trying to fix things so that they're not constantly fighting fire, so they can breathe a little bit. And along the way, they end up doing DevOps. But one of the things I love about the book is that at no point does anybody say, hey, we're going to get to DevOps. Right? All they're trying to do is make their process better. And that's one of the fundamental things, I think, about a good, successful DevOps implementation or DevOps transformation, is that you're focused on trying to make things better. DevOps is what comes out of it. If you go into it with the idea of, hey, we are going to adopt DevOps, you almost always have some preconceived notions about what things you're trying to fix, and it may not be the right things. Anyway, so one of the things that comes out of that book, Phoenix Project, is something that they call the 3 ways, the values, philosophies that frame the processes, procedures, and practices of DevOps, as well as the prescriptive steps. And I'll go through real quick. It's not so important that you know them by heart or anything, just that you know what they are. The first way is the idea of systems thinking, looking at the whole system as opposed to a specific department, division, individual, project, app. You're looking at how it affects everything. All right. This kind of goes along with some of the W. Edwards Deming theory or quotes. One of them being, if you have if you have a group that's focused on metrics and the rewards are based on those metrics, then the teams will meet those metrics, even if they have to destroy the organization to do it or destroy the enterprise to do it, right? It's thinking, hey, what's the effect of this on everybody? It may help me, but does it make life worse for everyone else? So the first way is systems thinking. The second way is amplifying feedback loops. Shorten and amplify your feedback loops so that necessary corrections can be made. So in other words, we try something, we see how it happens, and we correct, right? Next time we do it better, the time after that we do it better, and we keep doing that, right? Each time we're trying to make things, we're trying to get feedback to get things working right. And feedback in DevOps and in our pipelines for software development is almost always in the form of some form of testing or checking, right? And then the third way, the last way, is building a culture of learning, okay? Create a culture that fosters continual experimentation, taking risks and learning from failure, and understanding that repetition and practice is a prerequisite to mastery. We're not going to get better unless we try different things, and when we try different things, we are going to fail. That's normal. That's not a problem. Right? And this is kind of along the lines of Thomas Edison's quote about when they asked him about the 10,000 failed designs for the light bulb he had. He said, I haven't failed 10,000 times. I've found 10,000 ways that didn't work. Right? You're going to try different things. Some of them are going to work, some of them aren't. Some are going to work well, some of them are going to work okay, and you're going to keep tweaking and everything. But in order to really be successful in a DevOps culture, you need to get to the idea that failures are going to happen. We are constantly doing experiment. Everything we try is an experiment. And sometimes they'll work, sometimes they won't. We're going to learn from them though, right? Win or lose, fail or succeed, those are learning opportunities. And when you can get to that, you're truly getting into a place where you can succeed at DevOps. We'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through. Now, obviously, along with these are cultural changes, right? So far, when I've talked about it, you've noticed DevOps is not about installing tools. It's not about setting up certain pieces of software and building the pipeline. It's really about looking at your process, okay? And again, I think companies that bring us in, or organizations bring us in, which is frequently, hey, can you set up these tools? Can you install these tools for us? We want to get to DevOps. That's a good way in for us, but it doesn't get them to DevOps. It gets them the tools they need so they can start breathing and doing some of the things that need to get them to DevOps. And one of the primary things that I joked about earlier is, the idea that they'll bring us in and say, hey, we'll do whatever it takes to get to DevOps as long as we don't need to change the way we do business, right? And that's a guaranteed failure, right? There is no way for that to work, because if that would work, if your process that you currently have was going to get you to DevOps, you'd be at DevOps, right? So we'll talk a little bit about different types of organizational structures. These are called rostrum models, right? There's 3 of them. And the 3 types of organizations that Rostrom found were ways to break things down. He found that the first one was called pathological, right? And hopefully no one has to deal with a pathological environment at their client site, but pathological is very power-oriented, right? It basically says, somebody at the top says, this is the way things shall be, and you will do things my way, right? It's a blame culture. There's very little cooperation, and experimentation is basically prohibited. So obviously this is not going to work for DevOps, right? Slightly better, but still not good at all, is bureaucratic, right? And that's rule-oriented. There is some cooperation, but you're really bounded on what you can do, so experimentation is discouraged. If you fail, you're punished. So most people try to stay within the bounds of what they're allowed to do. They don't try to push the limits, because as long as they stay in their bounds, well, hey, how bad could they punish me for following the rules, even if I know there's better ways to do things? And the way that really helps with DevOps is called generative, okay? And this is performance-oriented. Experimentation is encouraged, right? We've adopted the third way, the culture of learning. Every failure is learning. This leads to high cooperation. It means we're going to look to see if things are working and use that as our measure of success, not whether I followed the way it's always been done before, right? So part of adopting DevOps is getting to an organizational culture that's generative. Now, no organization fits, well, most organizations don't fit squarely into one of these three. There's places that are generative, places that are bureaucratic, maybe even certain parts of the organization they're pathological, but they tend to mostly fit into one of these, right? And what we're trying to do is get as much of the organization into the generative culture, the idea that experimentation is encouraged, the fact that failure is going to happen and that's not a problem, it's not something that we're going to blame people for, right? Because what they found is that organizational culture is the strongest predictor of ID performance. In other words, if you are pathological, your best case scenario is probably that things are going to be failing most of the time. You're not going to be really high volume, high success rates, doing really good work in your IT organization. Bureaucratic, you have a better shot, but if you're generative, you really do have a good shot of things working out well. All right. Along with that, I've mentioned process change a lot, and I do tell this story to our FDO classes and to a lot of the talks I give on DevOps. And that is the idea that we're going to have to change our process. And one of the examples I use is there's a story about scientists who put 5 monkeys in a cage. At the top of the cage is a bunch of bananas, and there's a ladder leading up to the bananas. So the scientists put these 5 monkeys in the cage. They close the cage door. Monkeys look up, see the bananas, and one of the monkeys starts climbing up the ladder. As soon as the monkey starts climbing up the ladder to get the bananas, the scientist hose down all 5 monkeys with ice water. Right? The monkeys get dried off. They look up, they see the bananas there, another monkey starts climbing up the ladder. The scientists hose all 5 of them down with ice water again. Right? After a while, the monkeys start realizing the pattern, and so every time someone climbs up on the ladder, every time one of the monkeys gets up on the ladder, the other 4 monkeys pull them down and beat them up so that they don't get hosed down with ice water. And eventually, the scientists don't have to hose them down at all. But naturally, as soon as the monkey gets up on the ladder, the other 4 monkeys pull them down and beat them up. Right? This goes on for a while, and eventually, the scientists take one of the monkeys out and replace him with a new monkey. Well, that new monkey looks up, sees the bananas, starts climbing up the ladder. So what do the other monkeys do? They pull him down, they beat him up. Right? The scientists, one by one, replace each of the monkeys until there are 5 monkeys in the cage, none of whom have ever been hosed down with ice water, none of whom have ever seen any of the other monkeys get hosed down with ice water. But every time one of those monkeys climbs up on the ladder, they pull that monkey down and they beat him up. Why? Because that's the way it's always been done. Right? And Admiral Grace Hopper once said that the most dangerous words in any organization are, that's the way things have always been done. That's the way we've always done things. And the reason for that is, again, you're not going to get different results if you're not going to change your process. So a huge piece of adopting DevOps is going to be understanding that you're changing your culture to something that's generative, where experimentation is encouraged, where failure is considered a learning opportunity, right? And changing your process so that you get better and better and better. All right, so I'll stop again just for a few seconds here. Anybody have any questions for me? I know I'm moving really fast. I want to give people time to ask a lot of questions when we get to the end, though. All right, here we go. So what is DevOps? I've talked a lot about what's around it. DevOps is a human endeavor that creates performance and quality through culture change and continuous improvement. So you can see why I focus on culture change and continuous improvement. Now this is one person's conversation. One person's. Hold on just a second. I have this book.
You do.
Okay. So this is one person's definition. There are no official definitions of DevOps, but this one is one, I think it came from John Willis and Damon Edwards. I do like this because it points out that the whole goal is to create performance and quality. It's just to get better at doing what we're doing through culture change and continuously improvement. It's not automation. It's not rules. It's not getting rid of ops. It's not getting rid of testing. It's not developers carrying the pagers. Some of those things may happen in different levels, right? But it's about changing the way we do our business, changing the way we operate, changing the way we think, changing our corporate culture, our organizational culture to create performance and quality. And it's a human endeavor. This is about the people, not about the tools, not about the automation. Right? The infinity loops here, this is often the way it's shown. It's become a very standard way to show a DevOps cycle. But it's really just about getting feedback throughout the entire release process. And I'll go into it for anybody that really wants to hear it, but I'm guessing most people either know what the development process looks like in general or doesn't really care. So along with that, right, back to the idea of this creating a culture of learning, I want to talk about this story called the and-on chord. Now the and-on chord is something that happens on assembly lines. And it's a way of stopping the work on the assembly line when you notice a problem. That might be a problem in that I see something was built incorrectly. It might be a problem in that I'm waiting for the next piece of work to get to me. I'm supposed to get a new part to do whatever I do to that assembly line every X number of minutes, and it's not coming. Something else is holding it up. It may be the work is coming too quick, right? And it may just be that, hey, things are not going the way I think it should be. I think we can do a better job of this, right? And when anybody sees any of those situations, they are obligated on the assembly line to pull the cord, to pull the and-on cord. Now, some cases it's really a cord. In some cases it's a button that you press. In some places it's actually something that a machine detects that something's not going right, so it actually stops it on its own. But you're obligated to pull the cord if you discover a problem with production, with the pipeline, with any part of it, right? Everything stops. The team leader comes down to find out why it was pulled. And then together, the leader and the team figure out what the problem is, how they're going to fix it, how they're going to keep it from happening again, and they restart production, right? And so not only is the defect corrected, but the process is evaluated and is changed to make sure that the same mistake doesn't happen again. Now, when the first Toyota plant opened up in Kentucky, they were producing about 2,000 cars a day, and it was about double what other car plants in the U.S. were doing. And they said, so how are you producing 2,000 cars a day? And they said, well, we pull the and-on cord 3,000 times, right? At one point, they were doing 1,000 in one of the plants in Toyota. I think in Japan, actually, they were pulling 1,000 pulls a day. And when some American businessmen visited, and a couple of years later, they came back to see how things had changed, and they were only pulling the cord 800 times. And the American businessman said, that's great. You've cut down the number of times it's pulled. But the Toyota executive said, no, we've lost 200 chances a day to 200 chances to improve every day, right? And they worked and they made it a goal to increase the number of times the and-on cord was pulled. And my understanding is now that they're pulling it about 3,500 times a day, right? Now, this is stopping things, getting them fixed and recovering very quickly, right? Obviously, if it's happening 3,500 times a day, they're not big stops, right? And when you think about the stuff that they're stopping it for now is much more nitpicky, or would have been considered nitpicky compared to what they were stopping it for when the process first started, right? But this is the idea of continuous improvement, right? This is the idea that we are constantly getting better. Sometimes we're fixing longer term problems, sometimes we're fixing short term problems, sometimes we're making the process better that's going to make our work easier in the long run. Sometimes we're just fixing, hey, we missed checking this, so now let's check it so this problem doesn't creep in again, okay? All of this is critical to adopting DevOps, is the idea of pulling the end on cord, continuous improvement, continuous learning. All right, another big piece of DevOps is continuous delivery. Now, a lot of people will mix up the terms. Just because you're doing continuous delivery does not mean you're doing DevOps. Continuous delivery is the idea that I can deliver value on a continuous basis, and that we're not making releasing software a technical decision. We're removing the technical impediments to it. We're making it smooth. It's not a huge chaotic event. And so one of the lines I really like from Mary and Tom Poppendike, how long would it take your organization to deploy a change that involves just one single line of code? And do you do this on a repeatable, reliable basis? If you can't do this, you don't have continuous delivery, right? If you can release just, hey, we found a bug, it's costing us money, let's go ahead and fix it, and it's just one line, let's push it out, how quickly can we do that? And the team says, hey, we can do it, but you're going to have to forfeit this sprint. We're not going to get anything else done. We're going to have to cut a lot of corners. It's a very chaotic thing. Well, then you're still probably not in continuous delivery. Continuous delivery is the idea that this is something that happens on a repeatable, reliable basis. We make a small change, we push it through. We make another small change, we push it through. We do small batch sizes. Why small? Well, because if I'm making small changes along the way, then the risk of each of those changes is very low. I don't have to spend a lot of time worrying about, hey, is this going to break everything? It's just a tiny little change. We know if it breaks something, it's going to break something small. We can see that. We can check that, right? And if I do small change after small change after small change, well, then I'm actually getting some real changes put into place over time that's going to accumulate. Each of the small changes had very low risk, right? And if I can get to the point where doing those releases, those small changes, and pushing them through doesn't cost me a fortune to do each one, whether I'm talking about time, effort, actual money, right? Then I'm to continuous delivery. That's the idea, that we're breaking down to small pieces. Each one is non-chaotic. Each one is low risk, and each one doesn't take us much time to do. We've reduced the overhead of doing it, so we can push them out on a completely repeatable, reliable basis. And the goal is, like I said, making deploying software to production a business decision, not a technical one. I've removed the technical impediments to doing a software release. That's continuous delivery. If the stakeholders can say, hey, can we take the latest features you just demoed to me and push them out to production? And you say, yeah, it's going to take X number of hours, X number of days, whatever it's going to take. But it's a non-issue. We can do it. No big deal. That, to me, is getting to continuous delivery, right? And I like this quote that goes along with it from Adrian Cockcroft. Remove the constraints until the only constraint is the number of good ideas the product owners can come up with. When you have stuff that can flow through your process as quickly as the product owners can come up with ideas, that's continuous delivery. There are no technical impediments to getting business decisions, or to get business features out there. All right, another quick break. Anybody with questions? No one yet? Okay. So adopting DevOps. So hopefully you've got an idea of what goes into making the idea of changing to DevOps and getting there, but how do you go about it? right? Well, like I said, the way the Phoenix project described it, and that's why I like recommending it as a book for people that are trying to adopt continuous delivery in DevOps, is that they were just, in the book, they were just trying to fix the problems they had, fight the fires they had right then, so that they had time to breathe, so they could figure out what the next big problem was, and they could address them so they weren't really killing each other trying to get their day-to-day work done. And largely, the successes we've had doing DevOps implementations and continuous implementations, transformations at our clients has been this idea of doing it piecemeal, incremental delivery, changing things a little bit at a time so the risk is low, small batch sizes like I just described. Remove the biggest problem, make it so that that's no longer a problem, right? And then fix that. Once that problem's fixed, you pick the next biggest problem, right? There's an idea called the theory of constraints. And one of the people that popularized it was Goldratt on in the Goal, which was the predecessor to the Phoenix Project. That's what the guys that wrote the Phoenix Project based it on, was a book called The Goal. And it was all about removing the biggest constraint, with the idea that if you don't look at the biggest constraint, if you don't look at where your biggest roadblock is, then you're not going to get any better, right? If you fix something that happens before the biggest roadblock, your biggest roadblock is still your biggest roadblock. Nothing's flowing past that any faster. If you fix something after the biggest roadblock, then you're not getting work quick enough to take advantage of it. You have to fix things at the biggest constraint, at the biggest impediment, and get rid of that impediment so that things will flow faster. And once things are flowing a little bit faster, now you look at the next biggest thing, right? And the real goal here to do it right is to look at your value stream. Look at at least the light exercise we do, write down your steps, figure out what things are taking time, where are we spending a lot of waste, right? Where's a lot of wait time, what things are taking too long, where can we speed things up, and attack those. If you can fix those, then you can move on to the next one and the next one and the next one, and your process starts getting faster and faster, right? So choose one impediment, come up with a plan to remove it, and then start looking at the next impediment, right? And that's what you're trying to do to adopt DevOps and continuous delivery. Some of the benefits. The benefits we quote often from what's called the DORA report. It's a report that comes out once a year. 2019 is not out. But the 2018 report by DORA is called Accelerate the State of DevOps, and a book came out that went along with it called Accelerate by the people that did the report at DORA. DORA has since been bought by Google, but DORA is the DevOps Research Assessment Group, and some of the things they found, and it's been fairly consistent year after year in the types of results they found, and that is that the elite performers, the top 7% of organizations, the ones right at the top of their game, they deploy code 46 times more often than low performers. The lead time, the time it takes to get from an idea to delivered, the aha to the ka-ching, is 2,500 times faster. From I've committed my code to I've deployed, that code is deployed in production, right? And those are both delivery and speed, throughput benefits of DevOps. Two other metrics that they look at are operational, and those are that when there's a problem, when problems occur, they occur 1/7 as often in elite groups as in low performing, and when they do happen, those elite groups can recover from those failures 2,600 times faster, right? And some people often question, like, that doesn't make any sense, right? If it takes them half an hour, you're telling me it's going to take 1,300 hours or a good part of a year for a team to recover if they're in the low group? The answer is actually yes, it does, and it's talking about a full recovery, right? Sometimes you get the system, let's say it's a system crash, you get the system back up and running, and you find out where the problem was, and you need to push some changes through, and you need to get some monitoring around it. And by the time the ripple effects of making all those changes and everything are felt, you're well into a good part of the year, right? And remember, it takes you 2,600 times longer to recover if you're in the low performing group, and it happens 7 times more frequently. So it really is not an incremental benefit to adopting DevOps. It's a huge, huge, huge benefit, right? Anybody that's looking for reasons or ways to convince people, metrics, what are the benefits of DevOps, we highly encourage, go to the Dora report, download it. It's a free download, and look through it. They have a couple sections that are written for as an executive summary. It is not written specifically for implementers. This is written for people that need to make the decision, should we go to DevOps, or what are we going to see if we do go to DevOps? All right. Any questions? I'll wrap up and then I'll open it up if anybody doesn't have any questions right here. Okay. So my Coveros 5 for this, right, as to what DevOps is really. First, the delivery pipeline. The delivery pipeline is about building confidence that you have a viable candidate for production. It's a process from getting from a developer to production, or even before that, getting a requirement pushed out to production, the whole lead time, right? And our process that we talk about, our delivery pipeline, is that process. That's what we want to design. That's what we're going to look at improving throughout adopting DevOps. We need to strive for a generative culture, providing team members a psychological safety to fail. Failure is not a problem, it's a learning opportunity. We want to foster a culture of learning. And in doing that, we want to guide teams, don't control them. If we start putting up rules about how you do this so that you move faster, we're going to get ourselves to a bureaucratic or even a pathological organization, and we're not going to see the benefits of generative, of that culture of learning. You want to encourage team members to pull the and-on cord, whether that's in reality or figuratively, most likely, right, to continuously improve. Anybody on the team should be able to say, hang on a second, I think there might be a better way to do this, or hang on, I see a problem with this. If you're not in a situation, if you're not in an organization where team members feel comfortable voicing their opinions like that, right, then you are not in a generative culture, right? And a lot of those places where people just say, hey, I see a problem here, but I'm not, there's no way I'm mentioning it because I'm just going to get my head chewed off, that's pathological, right? That's as bad as it can get. So we're trying to get to generative. Hey, I see a problem. Let's talk about how we can fix it. Let's talk about how it got here, what we can do to make sure it doesn't happen again, right? So it's really, really important. Continuous improvement, generative culture are huge in trying to adopt DevOps. Using value stream mapping to help you understand your process, right? That's important because that's telling you what your process is. One of the things I like doing when people take the FDO course or the do this as a workshop is to tell them take their value stream back to their office and put it up on the wall or put it on a wiki or something if they're remote and keep it up to date. Because what you'll start finding is as the team starts looking at it and talking about it and actually doing the work, you'll start noticing you miss pieces where some of your estimates on the amount of waste time and work time are off, right? And you can start refining it and you can start doing a much, much better job of identifying where your roadblocks are and what the impediments are. And a lot of times people just don't understand what their process is, right? They look at their very narrow sliver that they're affected by, or they have some idea of what other people do, but they don't really understand all the steps involved or why it takes so long. And having the whole team, having the whole group, the whole organization be able to see, here's what we need to do to release software can be very enlightening, often not in a good way. One of the examples I give in FDO is I was doing a private FDO, and I had about 20 people in the class. So we split it up into 2 teams to do value stream mapping. And even though they all worked on the same product, they came up with radically different value streams because they had different people on their groups figuring out what they were. So they actually took the time to get together and they combined them into one value stream and started realizing that, you know, even in groups of 10, they only understood half to 2/3 of what the process looked like. And it took a combination of people from all over the company to get to what they were able to fill it out over the course of a couple hours, taking breaks and doing it during lunch and stuff like that. And by the end of the 2-day course, they actually had a much better appreciation for just what their process was, and that already told them a lot about what they needed to change just to make things better, even if it wasn't with the goal of getting to DevOps in particular, just trying to make things better. And last, the goal of adopting DevOps, the goal of trying to get to continuous delivery, right, is all about removing your biggest impediment. When that's not a problem anymore, right, then you're going to remove the next biggest, right? And you're just going to knock them down one by one, because doing piece by piece is the way you're going to reduce risk in the adoption. You're going to be making smaller changes to your processes. There's less risk involved in doing that. People understand it better. You can see the impact of it better. If that turns out to be a bad decision, well, you can go back, put the old way back in place and try something different, right? It's a culture of learning, a culture of experimentation. Failure is a learning opportunity, right? And that really, all of that really goes to what the goal of DevOps is, right? So when I put up the slides, I also have some books we recommend when trying to go through this. There is a book on the value stream mapping. It is not at all a software book. The Phoenix Project obviously is, and we do recommend that everyone reads that. It's a very easy read. Like I said, it's a novel. It's not a reference book. It's just a story. It just happens to be technical and technically oriented. Lean thinking is about getting rid of waste, and a lot of what went into both the Phoenix Project and how to react to your value stream comes from lean thinking, which also eventually became a key part of what's called the Toyota production system, the way they build cars at Toyota. And then lastly, accelerate the state of DevOps, right? The DORA report, well worth downloading and flipping through and finding this stuff. They have a lot of great examples of what things worked and what things didn't, how they came up with some of the numbers, how they were able to make the analyses and come to the conclusions that they did. And actually the book Accelerate, which some of the TMs are reading right now, is specifically about how they did the study and how they were able to, what the data behind all of that survey information was. All right, so that went really quick, a lot quicker than I expected. I was expecting some questions, but let me jump back to the beginning. All right, and point out that when I started out, I was saying that DevOps was about trying to remove the biggest worries, trying to make things run much smoother, trying to make things flow much easier, right? And hopefully you can see in the things that I pointed out in DevOps how those things help this, right? You're trying to figure out what your biggest worries are, what are the biggest problems, what are the things that are going to work, what are the things you don't expect to work, what things hold you up, what does it not matter if I change this from taking 5 minutes to 4 minutes because something else I have to wait for an approval that's going to take 3 weeks. It doesn't matter if I spend 3 or 4 minutes here. All of that goes into the adoption of DevOps. All right, so anybody with questions? Did this help? Did this explain a lot of what we were talking about last week?
I attended the presentation last week too, and I think this was really helpful.
Okay.
A lot more, yeah, our level, I think. Relating to that, I remember last week people were talking about the role of a DevOps engineer. So, and I remember someone saying that that's often conflated with automation engineer, things like that. So then what really is the role of a DevOps engineer? So,
and that's really, that question alone was what sparked that conversation in the first place and caused us to have the brown bag last week. In our view, it means so many different things. There's no way to say what a DevOps engineer is. There are a bunch of roles that if we wanted to be more specific, that what we'd call them, one of them is, yeah, an infrastructure automation engineer, someone who comes in and does Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Docker, Kubernetes, those types of tools, and get the making sure we can deploy software automatically. That is often what our clients bring us in to do, and they call us DevOps engineers there. A lot of other times, DevOps engineer really means someone who is looking to get more testing into the pipeline, right? And they're a test automation engineer. So they're really just showing how to use Selenium, or Max's product Selenified, which is a layer on top of Selenium to do web testing, right? And that's actually what Max is going to be teaching in a couple weeks, to show how we can use automation to test websites. A lot of times when people say DevOps engineer, that's really what they're talking about. Very infrequently, when they say DevOps engineer, what they really mean is what we called in that discussion either a DevOps coach or a DevOps architect. Although a lot of times they'll tell us that's really what they want people brought in to do. And in those roles, what we see is a DevOps coach is teaching a lot of the culture stuff and working really talk how are we going to get around, how are we going to change these impediments, how are we going to get rid of these. Or an architect is someone who may know a bunch of these pieces and can start stringing them together to show organizations how they can start setting up their software pipelines so that they don't fall into those traps. But like I said, one of the recurring themes that I think just about every consultant that's been here for any length of time doing DevOps has seen is the idea, and sometimes most of the time they don't use these exact words, although they come pretty close sometimes. We want to get to DevOps, we just don't want to change the way we do any of our processes. Most of the time it comes out as, here's your biggest roadblock, what can we do to change that? Oh, we can't touch that. Yeah, that's not in our control. That can't be changed. You have to do whatever else you can do to fix things. But again, is that if that other things around it isn't going to really be the approach. So anyway, those are all different types of roles that get called frequently DevOps engineer. I'd say the one that we're most often, that it's most often needs is someone who is going to install Chef, Puppet, Ansible, Docker, Kubernetes, and do the automation thing. So what we would consider an infrastructure automation engineer. But if they want to call us a DevOps engineer at our client site, great. We just need to know internally, this is what we really mean on this particular project. So, and it goes for the types of projects we say too. We say that TSA that I'm on now is a DevOps project. Well, it's really an infrastructure automation project, right? And there are other DevOps projects that we're doing that are really test automation projects. So it's important internally that we are able to distinguish between them so people know what they're walking into or what type of work we're looking for. Does that answer it?
Yes, I think so, but I have a bit of a follow-up. So then for Coveros, what does that role mean to us in an agile culture that is generative? Like what do our DevOps engineers, which role?
Well, we should not have DevOps engineers because we know it's a nonsense term. Right? We know it's a widespread term, but it makes no sense internally because it just doesn't mean anything. It could mean too many different things, right? Most of our engineers are split up into test automation engineers and infrastructure automation engineers. But we do some development, especially agile engineering, where we're figuring out how to do continuous integration, which I didn't go into here, but it's just like the first part of continuous delivery. Just how do we write software and get feedback on it faster? So that's part of it, and we did some of that at healthcare.gov. That a lot of us on that project were doing that. That was not intended to be a DevOps project on the whole, although there were some people that were doing infrastructure automation on that too. So yeah, short answer, that it's a nonsense term. We should not be, internally, we should not be thinking in terms of DevOps engineer because it just doesn't mean enough.
Thank you.
Yeah. One other thought on that, this is Dave, is externally sometimes we have to kind of market from a recruiting perspective that way because that's in some regards the way the market, certainly some people in the market recognize that as a thing, and therefore sometimes we have to say we're looking for DevOps engineers, although we do understand what Gene just said, that doesn't really mean much. It's too broad.
Yeah, and a lot of times our interview process, when we do bring somebody in as a DevOps engineer, I'm doing a phone screen, the initial talks are to try to figure out, okay,
Yeah,
what are they looking for? What do they think DevOps engineer means to them? Because we want to see
Yeah.
which type of roles are going to be best for.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't shy away from clients calling us DevOps engineers because it carries a price tag with it, and it has market share. So we want that, but we do internally. We should know what it means to us.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
When you're doing value stream mapping, especially when you have a bunch of different processes in place. So, for example, on the media team, right, we have processes in place for all of the projects and products we're managing. Would you recommend starting with doing one, or would we do a value stream for each individual product, or because all the processes are so different?
Yes. Yeah. So I think the value stream book, I forget exactly how it words it, but it actually says you're not done until you have done value stream mapping for every product that you produce, right? So some of them are going to have some overlap, some of them aren't. You need to do them all. The one thing you have to worry about, though, is trying to find the balance of doing that and not getting into the idea of pigeonholing something and not looking at the idea of systems thinking, which is how does this fit into the bigger whole? Right? How does it affect the whole organization? Right? That was the first way, is the idea of systems thinking. Because if you just focus on, let's say, newsletters, right, without figuring out how that's going to, what the process is for newsletters, without figuring out how does that play into what we do for events, what we do for consulting, how is it affecting the other groups, how is it affecting the other tribes, how is this furthering Coveros' mission? Well, then you might be really getting really great newsletters out with a really advanced process that ends up killing some of the other products we're doing, or killing the other processes, or making life harder for everyone else. Right? So yes, do it individually, but also keep in mind that it's part of a bigger whole, and try to start figuring out how those things interact. And like I said, I do send people out of our courses and my talks whenever we do value stream, with the idea of go back and do this at home. Put something up on the wall and just start filling in things. And you start noticing things are missing, add them, right? And keep track of them, and really get a feel for what do you really do. Because a lot of times people write down their steps and they only have like 5 steps when I start asking. So, you do step 1 and then immediately falls over to step 2. Oh, well, no, we send it off to, this other group. But when they come back, then we start. It's like, okay, add that, right? And start realizing that turns out there's a lot of extra steps to their processes. Nobody has a simple process for software development that fits on one page. Everybody's is much, much, much more detailed than that when you get down to it, all the pieces that happen. Hopefully we can get it to mostly automated, but again, the places they're calling us in almost always have enough problems. That's why they're calling us in, that these are 2-3 page type value streams. Anyone else? All right. Well, if anybody does have any more questions for me, please feel to reach out on Slack or give me a call. Like I said, I hope this helped and cleared up some of the confusion we sowed last week with the discussion we had, and hopefully it gives everyone a better idea of what we mean when we're talking about doing DevOps transformations in different organizations. All right. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gene. Thanks, Gene.